Don Mazzello here again for Small Business Digest. We have a very unusual guest. Unusual because he's successful, unusual because he has a way of working, which when I read about it, I found fascinating, and that's why we asked him on the program. Ryan Niddel, welcome to the program.
Don, thanks so much for allowing me the opportunity to spend some time with you. Really appreciate it.
Mhm. Ryan, as we ask all our guests, first tell us a little bit about yourself personally, then what your company is and what it does, and finally a website before we do anything else.
Absolutely, Don, be my pleasure. So I'm from Columbus, Ohio, kind of born and raised an Ohioan, was fortunate enough to use that to eventually get into, of all things, mechanical engineering. So studied
Mm.
mechanical engineering at a little university called Miami of Ohio. When I wrapped up my studies, jumped into the illustrious world, as I call it, of high-end automotive car sales. So I was essentially a fancy used car salesman for a period of time in my life. It's a very short period of time that eventually led to dealership management and different pieces and parts that way, which opened the door and afforded me the luxury, Don, of hopping into a startup web hosting company. It would have been about 13 years ago now, and came on board as a sales professional. Then grew that, took over as president and CEO, went into some emerging markets and sold it off to GoDaddy. Gosh, 10 years ago now, 9 or 10 years ago. That was the start of my entrepreneurial journey. When you look at the real business acumen side of things, where use that to jump into custom clothing and designed an app to help make suits and shirts and slacks fit individuals better. That's still being licensed by more than a handful of custom clothiers across the world. Own a small part of a wool manufacturing facility. Sold that business off to the head of sales for the company that I grew. And Don jumped into direct response marketing in the CBD space, right? So in 2016, launched a CBD-based product that was direct to consumer. Grew that from 16 to December of 18, and then sold that to a private equity group. From there, jumped into consulting, and that eventually led to really what's the forefront of my studies right now and what I'm focused on. And that's a company called MIT45. So it's MIT45.com. MIT45 is a kratom-based product, kratom being a consumable good, where anecdotal conversation would say if you take a little bit, it gives you energy. You take a lot of it, it's a little bit more of a relaxing sensation. Right, myself and my partners have grown this little company from 5 million a year in revenue to we'll just get under 80 million this year, and in a 4-year run rate. All equity still in house, kind of bootstrapped it from start to finish, and really just experiencing exponential growth and really predictable upside. So
Ryan, let me interrupt you for a second. What's your product again? Because I didn't quite understand it.
Yes, absolutely, Don. So the product right now, I'm the CEO of a company called MIT, the number 4, the number 5. And MIT45 sells, distributes, and manufactures a consumable good. And that consumable good is called kratom, Kratom. Kratom, think of CBD perhaps 5, 6, 7 years ago, before people knew what it was. Half the people thought it might have been, a marijuana derivative. Half the people thought that perhaps it was the best thing since sliced bread and was going to solve all the woes of society. Kratom is somewhere in that same vein, just very obscure, right? It's only grown in 2 regions of the world, Indonesia and Thailand. And it's this product that's sold primarily in gas stations, convenience stores, some smoke shops across the country. So it's really a counterculture product at this moment in time.
Okay, so in fact, keeps you awake and gives you energy at the times when you need it. Am I?
Yeah, it's pretty close. So it's got an inverse relationship in the amount that someone would consume, where if you take just a little bit of it, and it's a high quality product made by a reputable manufacturer, small dosages typically, from what customers say, provide them more of a euphoric energy, more of a really clear, just feel good, nice and alert, no jittery, no anything. So it would be a good replacement potentially for something like a caffeine. However, when you take more of it, it has more of that relaxing sedative type of feel. So it's not one of those things of, gosh, I'm tired, so I need to take more and more kratom. It actually probably puts you to sleep. So just a little goes a long way.
Okay. And your site for people who want to know more?
Yes, absolutely. The site for this business specifically is the letter MIT, then the number 4, the number 5, or me personally as RyanNiddel.com, RyanNiddel.com. all of them eventually link to the same place.
Okay. Well, now having done that, what I'd ask you on the program is you have some ideas of how to keep a company going and growing, and I'd like you in your own words to explain it because I found it fascinating and thinking of putting it into our own company. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Don. So I find that as entrepreneurs, at least myself, I'm guilty of overcomplicating everything. And quite often the answer that's most advantageous for us is the opposite of that, right? It's simplicity. And so from that place of simplicity, I look at most businesses as just four primary components. You have the marketing component, the operational component, the sales component, and then the servicing component, servicing of clients or internal servicing. And so I call it the MOS method, right? Not incredibly creative as an acronym, just marketing, operations, sales, and service. And what I found is quite often as business owners, we focus so intently on the marketing and sales component, right? We drive more into that arena, and there's all types of things to consider in that space. But as marketing and sales inevitably increase, if you think of a table with four legs, perhaps the dining room table that you sit at to eat your dinner, well, if two of the legs start incrementally going up by 3 to 6 inches an evening, by the end of the week, your food's sliding off the table, right? It would go from one side to the other. Well, that metaphor is to say we have to also simultaneously increase the operational efficiencies and the servicing of those clients. And so I start with something like marketing. And marketing to me has two components. You have a branding component and you have a direct response marketing component. And as I look at most businesses, it's to determine what's the allocation of capital as a percentage of revenue as it pertains to those two buckets. Fancy way of saying, gosh, if you're prepared to spend 10% on marketing, how much of that goes to the long-term branding? Maybe things like press releases in a PR campaign, maybe just big time advertising, but the advertising doesn't have a direct response correlation to it. Of course, as we get into the marketing component, then we do start talking about marketing efficiency ratios, return on ad spend, so some metrics that are paramount for us to know how successful or how much room we have for success. And really, as we look at that marketing side of things, Don, so much of what I focus on is the correlation between customer acquisition investment and lifetime customer value. Of course, it's not necessarily reinventing the wheel here, but nonetheless, if my customers are worth $10,000 over the course of 3 years, and I'm comfortable spending $1,000 to acquire it because I know the lifetime customer value is greater over a period of time, and you're my competitor and you don't know your lifetime customer value, and the most you can spend is $600 to acquire a customer, well, it goes to stand with some reason that I'll probably eventually swallow up some market share from you because I can just outspend you. But it's really just understanding the ratios of the business itself. And so that's really a lot of what it is, Don, is keeping things incredibly simple and predictable. As soon as we look at a new sales script or something that's optimizing inside of sales, well, I need to press on at least two other buttons real quick. I need to look at the marketing side to see if I can keep as many leads coming in. And I look at the operational side to see if I can actually support the growth. Because quite often we hit that vein of gold, if you will, in the marketing campaign or in a sales campaign. And all of a sudden it breaks the structure of the organization as a whole, and bad customer experience, which leads to lower lifetime customer value, which has that ripple effect across the industry as well, of course, right? One or two upset customers might be able to get past, but a plethora would be a challenge.
Ryan, let me interrupt you. You keep looking to your right. Is there somebody there giving you feedback? Because
there's someone holding up. There's someone holding up big signs. No, in all seriousness, my office faces the road, and there's some random construction and things that are popping up that are very uncommon. So typically I would have the blinds closed potentially, but glance over to the right to see what's going on outside just for a moment.
Okay, well, you keep doing it and you're losing your audience. So keep that in mind. Okay. What you're saying is so very important. So let me feedback a little bit of what I'm hearing. You're in effect to say keep it simple, but keep in balance those four issues. MASS, which I love as a term. this is what you're saying is the important thing, and you've got to keep them in perspective as you move forward. Am I hearing you correctly?
You are in fact hearing me correctly, Don. And right, we can even get into, as I look at most business, again, we're talking small market businesses, Don, those $50 million a year and under businesses. It's how good is the reporting, right? How is a CEO or how is a decision maker making decisions? Do they have quality reporting that's verified, right? Are they tracking the efficiency of their marketing dollar? Are they tracking the conversion rates of sales? Are they tracking average shopping cart value potentially, or contract value? Are they tracking lifetime customer value to be able to really create a correlation of when to do what next, right? It's just so common to me to be able to, from a consulting side, come into a business and have people focus on top line, which is beautiful, right? We need that revenue to come in the front door, but simultaneously, we also need some money left at the end. We need some bottom line profit. So then we start really diving into, where's the money going? And seeing some of these, as I refer to them, accidental entrepreneurs, which I am certainly one of them. My hand is raised. I didn't have a pedigree to be a business owner. Things just kind of happen over a period of time. And as they've happened over that period of time, it's very difficult and challenging to pause to learn what you don't know, right? So we're using our entrepreneurial ventures as our testing ground for new ideas. And I find it to be so fascinating that by finding someone like yourself or a business consultant or going for an MBA to start to get some additional insight into just what you might not know as a business owner. It's that childlike curiosity.
Well, your website, before we go any further.
So my website is ryanniddel.com. That's RYANNIDDEL.com.
Well, we're sitting here. Most of my audience are under 50 employees. Whether what their sales are is they can vary from 100,000 to millions. But when you say have accurate reporting, how do you make sure you're getting the right information?
Yeah, so part of my process, Don, is to sit down with the business owners and talk about what are those key performance indicators, both prevailing and lagging, that might be pertinent to start to understand where they come from. And quite often it's an educational based conversation through questioning, right? More of a Socratic method of just talk to me about your business, talk to me about what you sell, talk to me about how long it takes to sell that product to a customer, how many touches is it going to take? And then diving into, to me, some of the best practices. I think every business owner should have an idea of how much cash is in the bank at all times, what their payables are at all times, what their receivables are at all times. I think they should know some key indicators from the previous day's production, right? How many units have we shipped out the door? How many phone calls have we made? What's our average talk time? What's our average closing rate? Not that one day is enough to perhaps dictate the success of a business, but it's the trending behind the scenes that start to show, to me, the efficiency of how a business is operating, right? It's okay to have a bad sales day or two, but you have a week or two, well, that could be, fairly catastrophic to a business over a period of time. And so much of it, Don, I've found that really from zero, it feels like, to, somewhere between $2 and $5 million a year in annualized revenue. That feels like this hustle grind part of the entrepreneurial journey, where I came up with a great idea. I've been selling it. I've been pushing it. I eventually found some people to help support it. And in order to make that transition from that, $2 to $10 million a year type of business, it's the acknowledgement that as entrepreneurs, as founders, as CEOs, that we're going to have to take probably a small haircut in the amount of money we take home to hire some more staff to create some leverage on ourselves and to start taking what we've learned and what we've developed on our own shoulders and disseminate that across people that can support us.
Well, let me ask you this question. What do you look for in an employee?
Yeah, for someone that I believe every company has its own culture. So I walk through an exercise with businesses that I'm either about to acquire or I'm fortunate enough to be brought in as a consultant or equity partner. And we get very clear on what the 5 core values are of that company. Right? Some of the ones that pop to the top of my head are radical candor, extreme accountability, right? Always thinking forward, being solution oriented. And we start to come up with, from the owner side of things, what does the company ultimately stand for? And that kind of provides that guiding light for the specific type of employees that are inside of an organization, where to start with, do they meet those value standards? Then me personally, I like someone that's solution oriented. I like someone that's a little bit of a hard charger. I like someone that wants to attach themselves to big outcomes and wants to be rewarded for those outcomes versus someone that just, I'm going to come in and punch the clock and put in my 8 or 10 hours and go home. But I run all of our potential candidates, Don. We've got a pretty, I'll say, aggressive hiring process now, where they take a multitude of different assessments and talk to different people. So we really find that right cultural fit, as well as IQ and EQ, to support the definitive aspects of the role.
Hmm. Well, there's been some discussion about mavericks. Well, Maverick is a very difficult person inside a small company. What do you do if you see somebody that you like but's a maverick?
So it's a great question, Don. I'm actually going through that right now with an incredible employee in one of my companies, and the maverick is equal as parts blessing and curse to me, because this individual is able to get in a tremendous amount done, is carrying a ton of weight for our organization, but yet the cultural upheaval that exists from this maverick is becoming too much to tolerate. So we started with the acknowledgement of, you're brilliant, you're powerful, you're successful, but we also have the emotional intelligence side of our business that's important to us, that it feels like a little bit of a family unit and that people are in support of each other. And the way that you're showing up, while incredible, is also really upsetting a lot of people. So we hired a coach for this individual to work on interpersonal communication, to increase their EQ. And we're at the backside of that coaching session, right? It's been 12 or 14 weeks. We've noticed some incremental increases, but Don, to be quite honest, I don't think that Maverick's going to be around in my organization for another 6 months. I think that for where we're going, the Maverick was an incredibly beneficial component of a season of business. That's really one of the things I find to be most often a thread that I can tie to every organization, is the people that have gotten us here aren't necessarily the best ones to get us there. Right? This individual did an incredible job of, we'll say $10 million a year to $30 to $50 million a year in revenue. But if we went from 50 to, inching into that 100 million, the company is just different. The roles and responsibilities are different. I mean, every year your business is growing by hundreds of percent. It makes sense to me that the roles and responsibilities are almost completely different every 12 months. And this Maverick, unfortunately, culturally is just not a good fit. And the culture, to me, is really what drives the success of most businesses.
Well, what will you do with him? Fire him or find another position?
So we'll look to find another position. What I found with Mavericks across the board, though, Don, in my experience, is they have that healthy ego. They have that healthy, right? I don't want to be demoted, or I don't want to be moved off the island that I've created for myself. And so while that will be an opportunity more than likely for this individual, I think it's a short-term Band-Aid. I think that for how this looks, I haven't seen that play itself out to fruition all that well. And so it's really this conversation that I'm wrestling back and forth with my partners on, what do we want to do here? How do we want to handle this particular situation? Is it something that we're going to try to find a spot for this person and know it might be a temporary spot? Do we want to actually let this person go, as we call it, firing well, and sit down and acknowledge this person's brilliance and thank them and give them, stock options on the way out the door, and give them, a nice, I'll call it cushion to land on fiscally, so that they're not, kicked out in the cold, because in theory, Don, they haven't done anything wrong, right? They've just been themselves. It's just the cultural and the fit of the business. It's just different than what they bring to the table.
Well, let me ask you, how do you and your partners reach decisions? By consensus? By uh, uh, what do you find is the best way of handling?
Yeah, so we have a saying inside of our business that it's our duty to protect democracy, not practice it. And what that basically means to us is, look, we want the insight from everyone around us, even us as partners. We want to bounce ideas off each other. But by the nature of me sitting in that CEO chair and them sitting more in the board or the advisory chairs at this point, we've conceded between the three of us that decisions should be unanimous. But if there's not a level of unanimity to this, that I break the tie, so that It's seeking insight from everywhere, a little bit of a meritocracy, but then we really get down to it, and it's right. The what is it? The head is heavy that wears the crown, or however that would
Mm,
be stated. You got to be able to make decisions and just go forward with them, and be humble enough to realize when the decision wasn't the best one.
mm. Sometimes no decision is better than some decision. Do you believe in that?
Ooh, that is a challenging question, Don. I will tell you that on my side, I believe that the time that we can, if we can shorten down the time from input to decision, that companies are able to iterate in a more fast and more expedient manner to get them to a desired outcome quicker. So when I say that, as long as the no decision is in fact the decision, right? I'm not going to make a decision on this so that it's finite, so that there's not this ambiguity that exists. I am much more wired, Don, that some decision, while seeking additional inputs from motion forward, is a better way to conduct business, as long as it's not reactionary, right? And of course, there's this fine line that you weave there between, the emotional response of a situation, and then the equal and opposite return energy that's put into altering that decision. So in some moments, I can say, yes, let's pause, let's take a deep breath, let's wait 24 hours. But what I find to be fascinating is, let's take an example potentially of wanting to alter the price of your product, right? And you do some market research, see what competitors are doing, see if you can justify the uptick in revenue inside of a company. But after that initial insight is compiled, and there's no new data that's going to come in to make the decision, I find it fascinating how many entrepreneurs I come across, how many employees will just sit there and wait, thinking there's going to be something else that comes to alter the decision. No, you've got the insight, you've got what you're going to get, make the decision and deal with the consequences.
Well, I have one more question. We seem to be entering when I was in the corporate world, if the boss said jump, you asked how high. Now it seems to be a world where we're supposed to defer to our employees. How do you deal with those two conundrums?
And conundrum is a polite way to say it, Don, where it is certainly a challenge. What we've done inside of the organizations that I own is we've really looked at it that myself or the partners inside the business, they're responsible for setting the big targets, right? The goals, the things that the rest of the staff may not be able to see. They might not exactly know how to get there. But then once we establish those big targets and we can pull them into, a year's worth of vision and then a 12-week sprint, once we get into that 12-week sprint style and we lock into what the objectives are for that quarter, if you will, then it also almost reverses. It becomes, I'm actually asking our staff how I can better support them and giving them the latitude of making the decisions inside their area of genius, right? Where I believe at this point in the growth of this particular business, that mid 45, that the more I can actually push decisions down into the organization, and it's not so much the CEO saying, jump left, jump right. I'm actually looking for the people whose feet are on the ground, who are right there in the thick of battle, to be able to be the ones that provide a lot of the strategic insight, determining on where we go and how we get there. So I think a hybrid would be my most appropriate answer. Is sometimes it's, I'm the boss and I said you got to do this, and if you don't like it, I get it, but I'm going to be doing it right next to you. And sometimes it's, hey, I don't really care how we get to the next hurdle inside of our business. Just know that it's your responsibility to ensure that we get there. And if you don't get there, well, there's ramifications for that as well.
Okay. Ryan and Niddel, we're running really out of time. Well, I have about a minute. What would you like to leave our audience with?
So, Don, I've been leaving audiences lately with a saying, and that's, to me, you're capable of far more than you give yourself credit for. And I've noticed so much inside of my life and inside of the businesses that I own. It's finding that person, it's finding someone that you believe in, that shows you that there's a greater possibility than you're giving yourself credit for. So the person that's running that $100,000 a year business that's listening to us right now, find the person that's gotten to 5 million and ask them for help, ask them for questions. The 5 million, find the 20 million, right? Because if someone else has done it, you are certainly more than capable of achieving the same, if not even greater results.
Well, on that note, we say thank you so much, Ryan, for a really very interesting time together. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Don. Appreciate it.